Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Group 8, and today we have 3 seminars to introduce to you. And I will start first, and I would like to talk to you about how leaders spark and sustain trend. Okay, as you can see, we are living in a constantly changing world. The technology develop, the business environment trend day by day that make trend the references, the habit and trend of each individual. And we can also see many brands could not catch up with the changing flow of the market and then being vanished if they do not change to adapt to the market. In other words, the business, the leader of the company have been able to transform themselves into better, more advanced, more fashionable version to be suited to changing environment. So I talk with you about trend, about transform ourselves into better. But how? If you are a leader, how can you transform from an effective manager to a highly effective leader? This is the main point and the reason for my presentation today. I want to introduce you about metaphor. In Vietnamese is called phép ẩn dụ. Metaphors are an especially important leadership tool because they help people in the organization understand and interact with the situation without being too abstract or too complex to be easily understood. Metaphors like these are simple and effective way to discuss and analyze what is working and what isn't, both personally and professionally. And the reason why they are paraphrased into metaphor is because by using some words with the common meaning, you can recall them easily and talk about them effectively with your team, with your group member. We can see more things than we can describe in words. And as Dr. Peter Fuller wrote in his Twitter that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a metaphor is worth 1,000 pictures. There are 7 interdependent metaphors that we will discuss together today. They will help you to gain on the concept and issue involved in leadership development. These were ways that a leader could become more effective and analyze what is working both personally and professionally. I will start with the first metaphor. It is fire. The fire metaphor represents enthusiasm, the ambition, aspiration. It is the motivational force, the burning ambition and need for trend both personally and professionally that can be sustained over time. And it can be triggered by crisis or desire, whichever which one work. Crisis may get you started, but desire to achievement will sustain it. And as the previous slide that I showed you before, you can see 5 are at the center of the 7 metaphor. It is because if the why, the reason isn't there, the other factors are just go into the motion. And Dr. Peter Fuller emphasized that burning ambition is the only motivation that sustains. You may train out of fear, you may provide the initial spark, but burn it in very short time. So I have to say that fire is very important metaphor for leadership transformation. I will move to the next metaphor. It is snowball. Snowball is about momentum. It is the snowball of average performance that can roll you into bankruptcies, and it is also the snowball of excellence that can roll you into market leadership. So, what is it? The snowball represents a cycle of mutual accountability that creates momentum for change, and it starts rolling when a leader opens himself up to the scrutiny of subordinates and asks for their support. This is considered as inspire others to follow. As more members of the team join the process and though causing drafts are removed, the snowball becomes more tightly combated and almost impossible to stop. And I will give you an example of this. As the case study that I read in the article before, Clinton is the manager of a beauty corporation, and he was exhausted by the passive culture of his company. Everyone in his company depends on him and always avoid difficult decisions. So Clinton, he wanted to change it. He admitted that he didn't have all the answers and asked his team for help leading the company. So, by exposing himself in this way, he sets a standard for others to follow. As more people got on the board, the momentum increased. Over the next 2 years, Clinton became very skillful at using silent and open-ended questions to encourage his team to step up. So that's all about snowball. Next, I will introduce you about mask. And this metaphor is very easy to understand, so I will talk about it briefly and quickly. Okay, smart represents authenticity, reality. Is the face you present to the world the real you? Some leaders use their mask to conceal their imperfection. The mask is very heavy burden to carry. It creates internal conflict in the leader and can negatively impact on the important relationship because it will create doubt, lessen productivity, and create turnover. But when the leader drop their mask to show their authentic self, they will get more done, build more trust, and have far more enriching interaction and feel more fulfilled. Okay, that's all about mask. The fourth metaphor is about movie. Most people get stuck doing the same thing over and over again. Movie is about reviewing and editing your performance to identify ways to improve. It is like about the mirror and the window. Poor leader look out the window and blame their staff for poor performance, but great leader look in the mirror to see how they could change their outcome. Movie like a process for increasing self-awareness and reflection, which allow a leader to edit their performance and direct a movie in line with their leadership division. By stepping out of the movie and viewing the footage objectively in the editing suite, leaders can hone their reflection capacity and learn how to slow down their movie. From this display of stillness, leaders can begin to direct their own movie and to a better response in real time. Okay. The next metaphor is about MasterChef. The MasterChef metaphor is about full application of leadership, framework, tool, and strategy for change to help make transformation happen. Over time, leader can and should advance from an amateur cook to a master chef by using their skill with increasing creativity and thus maximizing their impact. This means adapting the element of framework, using tools, and become more intuitive in the use of leadership strategies. And this requires a leader develop critical thinking skill and a deep understanding of where they are going and what leadership is. Okay, that's all about MasterChef. The next metaphor, I will talk to you about coach. Coach metaphor describe how a coaching staff can collectively help leaders achieve their aspiration. It is not about leaders become coaches, but this is about leaders let themselves be coaches by others. They can be consultant, they can be college or friends or even family member of a leader. We can learn from anyone. And coaching is more powerful when all groups identify mutually benefits or outcome from the leader's transformation and create a trusting environment for that coaching to take place. Okay, that's all about coach. Okay, we will move to the last metaphor. It's a Russian dolls. And before our discovering about the theory, about the definition, I will talk to you about what is Russian doll. As you can see in the screen, they are Russian dolls, and they are typically made of good and contain 3 to 8 identically shaped dolls neatly inside one another. And when you pull out one doll apart, another one slightly smaller sits inside. Each doll in a set typically resembles the other but may bring a unique image or pattern. So what is the Russian doll metaphor? The Russian dolls metaphor describes a complementary set of journeys that interact with a leader's personal journey, thereby increasing level of effectiveness. In our context, the Russian doll metaphors help us to understand that the leader personal journey never exists isolation. It is always surrounded by multiple other journeys occurring currently. And in one research that I read before, the subject identified that at least 5 different dolls or journeys which they felt were very important in their transformation. There were personal doll, a leadership doll, a team doll, an organizational doll. So what we now understand is that when a journey are neatly aligned, something magical can happen. So that's all about Russian dolls. Okay, this is my presentation.
Hello everybody, I'm Tans, and move to my part, I would like to introduce a little bit about managing innovations and resistance to change in the public services. So firstly, I would like to talk a little bit about change. So what is change? We will define change here. We will define change now. So I have a picture here so that change is mean opportunity, but we also can define change as different variations or like a substitution of one state to the other state, and changing is becoming or making difference. So here we got the table above. So 4 types of change based on the difference and the speed of how we change. These 4 types of change occurring for a long time. And firstly, when we change slowly in just a little bit, we got emergence. But we also change slowly, but more bigger, we got transitional. And while we change quickly and just a little bit, we got incremental. And both are quickly and large, we got transformational. So move to the table below, we got time to change. We will define time to change. We will change when we're going up. We will change when technology is changed. We will change also based on regulation, competitors, cost, or when we have new bots or economic change. Follow this, we got 11 theory of change. Firstly, the energy theory of change. The energy theory of change implies that if the managers do nothing, the organization will change on anyway. The second one in mathematical theory of change, mathematical models of life in the universe often predict steady state that will persist over very extended periods until the combinations of certain variables cause the overall state to step or to take quantum leap. At this point, the overall value may plummet to zero, break down, or may start growing at an ever accelerating rate, go critical. The other theory of change is economic theory of change. The economic theory of change claims that people will make change in favor of their own economic advantage. According to economic theorists, if markets are left unrestricted, then new suppliers will continue to appear until the competition between them results in cost and price that are so low that it is uneconomic for another supplier to enter the field. And another one is biological theory of change. The implications is that if the organization does not change and adapt as the environment, they will extinct. Anyway, the political theories of change will usually explicable in terms of desire of the powerful to retain and increase their powers. Also, sociological theory of change, when people come together in groups, communities, city or nations, level of confusion and anxiety raise. Attempts are made to manage this anxiety by creating structure, rules, or legislations. We also have cultural theory of change. Organizations can be viewed as the mini societies in which change are driven of restricted in accordance with the belief that are deeply held by the members of that society. According to cultural theories, people are likely to change their behavior in response to symbolic actions by managers. The more scenario managers, the more powerful the signal. Also, we have development theory of change to developmental theories. Curiosity and the search of stimulus are innate. To them, this explains the try of explore, to learn, to push back boundary, to break the new record, in short, to change things. So now we move to preparing to change. Firstly, we have to anticipate the readiness. The table here showing that the likely reaction of people to change. Firstly, we have adaptability and external volatility. If both adaptability and external volatility is low, people will gonna resistant. But when adaptability is high, but external volatility is low, people will gonna cooperative. And when both of them are high, we got proactive. But when adaptability is low but external volatility is high, we got fatalistic. It's like people think that is the destination to change. To conclude these sections on preparing for change, it is important to consider the role of consultation, communication, and setting targets. Based on avocado checklist here, we will have assistance, visions, optimism, communications, analysis, decisions, owners, and stakeholders. So, after define change, now I would like to talk a little bit about innovations. So, firstly, I would like to define what is innovations. Successful innovation is the creations and implementations of new processes, products, service, and method of delivering which result in significant improvement in outcomes, efficiency, and effectiveness or quality. There are two main types of public services innovations. Firstly, processes. products or service innovation which result in change in the feature and design of the service or products, and new or alternate ways to delivering services. The second one is strategy or business concept innovations result in new policy, new missions, objective, strategies, or rationales, and signify a departure from current practice. And why we need to innovations? We need to innovation to improve deliveries and outcome the public services. We also need to respond more effectively to altering public needs and raising expectations. And we also have to need innovation to contain costs and increase efficiency. And finally, we need to capitalize on full potential of ICT. So now we move to 5 types of innovations. Firstly, we got strategies or policies. It's such a missions, objectives, strategies, or rationales. We also have service or products like change in features or design of the product or services. We have deliveries, for example, news or alternate ways to delivering service or otherwise interacting with clients, and process like new internal procedural, policy, and organizational forms. Or finally is system interactions, for example, new or improved way of interacting with other actors and knowledge bases, change in governance. And here we got a lot of way manager can stimulate organizational innovations. We have pay close attention to views of users, frontline staff, and middle managers. Many innovations are identified and initiated by this group. We also have work backwards from outcome goals rather than forward from existing policies, practice, and institutions. This creates a greater variety of potential options. So now we will move to resistance to change. Here, I would like to introduce a little bit about the reason for resistance to change. The first reason is adherence to bureaucratic habit or difficulty due to multiple levels of authority, accountability, or reporting, and tendency to put decisions making upwards, or the relationships are guided by the interests of many stakeholders or conflicting interest agendas, aliens, reward structure, and values. Finally, financial support for change management programs is difficult to obtain. We also have psychological contract. This psychological contract governs how employees expect to work as well as what they are expected to achieve. Some people expect to work on their own initiative, or to use or develop certain skills, or to enjoy the companionships of others. If employees answer yes to any deal of questions, they may experiencing the change approved in their psychological contract. This is the tail question of detecting psychological contract. Do you think that this change might cause you to have less pay, less skill, less status, or less respect, also less holiday, less pensions, or less genuine security, also authority, or less satisfactory work, or less scope of initiative, or less opportunity to socialize? So now we will move to define who might resist to change. We should check out the older staff, the older employee, also the employee with less well educated, and the junior staff. And move to the table below, we got the predicting resistance to change. The table show that the scale and the seniority, when the scale is small but the seniority is peripherals, we got the predicting resistance to change is low. And if the scale is large, and the centrality is peripheral, the resisting is moderate. And if the centrality is central and the scale is small, we got moderate and the opposite. Here we got some common form of resistance like apathy, laziness, stick leaf, or working to rules. There's a lot of common forms of resistance to change. Now we move to the root of resistance to change. We got forming here. Forming individual try to make their mark in the group. Move to storming. In storming, conflict as egos. Clash and argue for positions and powers. From storming to norming, we got trying to agree, procedures and ways to operating. And from norming to performance, we got finally, if you are lucky, the group can do better than the sum of its parts. Then we move to the overcoming resistance to change with force field analysis. So force field analysis was developed by Kurt Lewin. The force field analysis enable managers to identify the force which are likely to restrain a particular change. The size of arrows reflects the strength of the force they represent. And the force field analysis is sometimes used with groups in order to structure an open discussions about what is blocking a change. And it also go from defiance to compliance and to alliance. So overcoming resistance to change was characterized by Rousseau Strong as the movement from defiance to compliance and to alliance. So now we move to evaluate conversational approach to managing resistance to change. There are a conversational approach which apply at the different situations and have a different drawback and benefits. So the firstly is coercion. This involves threatening people, for example, which lost their jobs, limiting their prospect, or transfer short-term contract which are only renewed if employee comply are a form of coercion. And the next one is manipulate. This approach is often used when the key stakeholders have a power to block change. And persuasion. To understand how attitude to change can themselves change, is it necessary to understand the processes of persuasions. And the next one is negotiations. Negotiation here is not persuasions, it's getting the best agreement that is possible when agreement must level reaches. And delegation. Delegation occurs where there is support for the change of people know that they can benefit, but they have advantages, shares workload, and responsibility can empower and develop, but also have drawback. The drawback of delegation can be time consuming, require close monitoring, and maybe depending on training and coaching. So number 6 is facilitation. Facilitations where individuals have problems, but the drawback it can be time consuming and expensive, but it still face some way. And the 7th one is participation. Participation occurs where information is missing or where strong oppositions. The advantages of this is gains commitment and relevant information, but we also have disadvantages. Disadvantages of that we must wait a lot of times and change maybe not be enough. The final one is learning, where new information or complete competence needed. The advantages of this is motivations, actually, involvement, new ideas or commitment, but the drawback is also time consuming and involve so many people, it can be costly. So finally, let's think about changing the ideas about change. Changing the ideas about change implies changing the way people think about the world. We try to avoid the idea that there's one right way to think about our world. Our implicit assumption has been that there may may have many views of the world at their individual viewing. As some might describe our assumption as postmodern, no one's bad way, only different idea about how best to make sense of changing words. We want to explore things, right? Okay, this is the end of my part. Let's move to my friends.
Hi, my name is Nhi and we will move to the final part of the seminar. Stakeholder mapping has often been used to work out how to develop the organizations in the midst of a network of others who may want to see the different outcomes. First and foremost is define the change. We explored the balance between clarity and ambiguity in defining change objectives. And we also applying the wrong thinking or putting oneself into the shoes of other can be very revealing when carried out seriously. And next is mapping. We produce a list of stakeholders. This is normally achieved through a dialogue within an internal team. For example, the stakeholder can be defined in relative groups, such as the competitors, or the smaller collectives, such as the specific competitors, a particular individual, such as the CEO of the supplier. And rule of thumb is the stakeholders should be defined in the smallest area required to understand who could act in relation to the change issue being addressed. For example, divided into the different areas case that relevant to the suppliers. First, if they accept the change when because it's the change in the familiar process, or they have a little interest in the change because the change had impact on the focal organization. The focal organizations is we change the suppliers in the process. If the difference between suppliers have been responded in a similar way and deliberately acting as a collective, we will choose the leadership role and not them separately when producing in a stakeholder map. And after identifying stage, we will map when they sit regard to your organization that depend on two axes. The first axis is stakeholder interest to change because the change to those who have the only a passing interest or who change the relatively unimportant part of their context. Or the biased interest. Biased interest is the stakeholder is concerned with the interest often only on the person connected to him or her. For example, the first-tier suppliers may not have very much interest in the choice of a second-tier supplier by the customer. And in ASIC 2, the direct influence on decisions and how change proceeds that based on the position. For example, the CEO or people who have ability to allocate or withhold the resources. And indirect influence is when stakeholders are not in position to make decisions themselves, but are able to give direction to the shape of decision. For example, stakeholders who have knowledge can be technical, business related, and derived from analysis or data that others do not have, that are acknowledged and used by the decision makers. And next, I will explain the four groups on the table. The first is the people who have the high power and interest. Is the people who must fully engage and make the greatest effort to satisfy. The secondly is people who have high power but less interested. Is it put enough work in with these people to keep them satisfied, but not so much that they become bored with your. And thirdly, is it the people who have low power and interest? Is it keep these people adequately inform and talk to them to ensure that no major issues are arising. These people can be often very helpful with the details of your project. And final group is low power and less interest. It is to monitor these people because do not bore them with the excessive communication. And next we will move to the practices to putting the mapping technique into action. The first is disaggregation. Is it a particular leader amongst the suppliers is identified as an opinion leader? Disaggregation is a process whereby groups separate because of the difference in interest. Secondly, aggregation. Aggregation are the collations of the stakeholders which share interests and less important to change. In reality, the stakeholders rarely keep a single position. They interact and move in terms of both interest and influence. Next is the dynamics are recorded in two ways. The first way is prescriptive dynamics. Is to provide a record of how stakeholders usually move. And prescriptive dynamics is actions that one takes in order to influence how others move. This case pays in French and related to the film industry. And this is the case study of Film de French. Film de French is a company that provides marketing and strategy consulting service to companies in the cinema or movie sectors. Film de French was established by a charismatic entrepreneur, and he is currently still a chief executive and a mature stakeholder. However, he near retirement, and debate over his succession has been identifying within the company. Decision-making is seen as authoritative, and the style of working is very traditional. So, the senior managers feel that the company is in need of modernization, but the CEO is reluctant to plan seriously for retirement. The senior managers are aware that it will be a difficult process for personal and business reasons alike, and they have met with the CEO to consider how to bring about change. Next, I will mention the target stakeholder map for succession. The next stage is for the managers to consider dynamics and decide what actions to take in order to change the shape of the map. Key targets are to reduce the interest and influence of shareholder A, as they could block change in order to increase their own influence. Secondly, the senior manager have the key allies in some shareholding family members who want the CEO to retire. Hence, some of shareholder B group have with persuading the CEO into the new way of understanding his role. And the senior managers could be able to strongly influence succession planning. Their intention is to establish a better relationship with clients and generate evidence of their ability to perform, and hence to be able to persuade the CEO and shareholder that they are competent to lead the company into the next phase of development. And after that, the senior manager gains some success. The chief executive has stated openly that he intends to retire and has started to introduce the senior managers to key clients as the leaders of the projects. The plan is to take more engaged approach to strategic renewal and seek to give the employees more voice. Finally, it's so that identifying the stakeholders can have an immediate impact on how the change issues is understood and defined. And thank you for your listening.